All right.
All right, Mimi, thanks for joining. So first thing we're gonna do is, can you give a quick, brief elevator synopsis of who you are?
Yep. So my first name is actually Bouchra, Danielkebir. I am from Boston, Massachusetts. I was gonna say born and raised, but not born here. I was born in Algeria, it's a country in Africa, but raised here. Went to Spelman College for undergrad, UGA for grad school, and going to law school this fall.
Okay. So you were born in Algeria?
Algeria, yeah. It's a
That's
country
North
that's
Africa,
adjacent,
right?
North Africa, yep, adjacent to Morocco. I'm part both.
Got you. All right. So
Yeah.
when did you come to the States?
I was young. I was 3 years old. But I've been back often, so I don't feel like detached. And I grew up in a very like traditional Arab Muslim household. So my parents were like very mindful about teaching us to like speak Arabic and just teaching us like the culture and the heritage. So very much so is what I grew up around.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then how often do you go back?
Um, I want to say like every 3 years. It isn't too often, especially since I started college. I couldn't go back as often with internships over the summertime. But if I can make time, like maybe 2 weeks, I'll go back. I haven't been there in 3 years though, because of COVID. So
Yeah, oh, right.
yeah, and they were on lockdown very bad. Like they had to like be in the home at like 5 p.m. Like it was pretty bad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw a post with you about seeing your grandma, like ain't seen her in 6 years or something like that.
I know we surprised her. Oh, that's so funny. I forgot that was a highlight. Yeah. So when was that? That was a really long time ago. But we actually, so my mother and I, like we travel together all the time, and it was a girls' trip for us, but we didn't tell anybody. And I know my mom didn't want to tell anybody that we were going there because every time we go, we have to like bring a ton of gifts. Like it's just a cultural thing. Like you got to bring gifts, you got to bring money. She was like, you know what? We're not gonna tell anybody, we're just gonna surprise them. So my grandma didn't know. And so it was just nice to surprise her because she hadn't seen me in a long time. And with the time difference, we don't get to talk often either. So it was nice to see her reaction, you know, surprise her a little bit, get to spend some time with her. So she's getting older. Um, so
Okay. So when y'all transitioned over here, who all came? Like, is it just your primary family or?
yeah, just a nuclear family. Everybody's still in Algeria. A lot of people have actually like migrated to France, Spain, so in Canada. So we're like all over. But it was just so my mother had initially came by herself just to kind of like set the foundation here, get a home ready and all that stuff. So she was here for a whole year before my father and I had come. And then my little brother was born several years like after we had finally moved. So it was just us three, nuclear family.
What? Okay,
By
mama.
ourselves in a new country.
Right. Dang, mama came a year before everybody, huh?
Yeah. We, as I've gotten older, we've actually like spoken a lot about how difficult it was for her. She had my uncle here who was my father's brother. He's passed away, he's no longer with us now, but he was the only one here to like kind of help her navigate just America. You know, like she came with the understanding, oh, this is like the American dream, you know, it's going to be so easy to make money and so easy to pay for an apartment, and actually ended up being harder for her, like very hard, just having to learn English, you know, simultaneously, and having to work minimum wage, which was really nothing at that time. So yeah, with age, she's become definitely more transparent about the sacrifices that she's had to make and just how difficult it was for her in that year before my father and I had come to support her too. So,
Okay. And
yeah.
then, so for undergrad, you went to UGA, right?
I went to Spelman. I went to
Spelman?
Spelman.
I actually went to UGA.
I went to UGA for grad school.
For grad school. Okay, that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. So I did Spelman, my full 4 years, and then immediately after, I got a full ride scholarship to go to UGA. So I was like, well, why am I going to leave Georgia now? I might as well just stay and get a degree. So I spent about 6 years in Georgia.
Okay. So
Yeah.
where were you before Georgia?
I was here in Boston. So when we had moved from Algeria, we moved here to Boston. I had always been in Boston. I left Boston for school and then came back for a job opportunity after grad school. So it's just always been Boston or Atlanta.
Okay, so what was the transition like from Boston to Georgia or Atlanta?
It was a culture shock. Because prior to going to Spelman, my world of Boston wasn't Black. And what I mean by that is that I went to a private school for high school. It was a predominantly white high school as well. And I just didn't grow up with a lot of minority friends.
Right.
I mean, yeah, just being honest, I didn't grow up with a lot of minority friends, and the school, like I said, was predominantly white. Very wealthy school too. So there was also kind of like that class,
Right.
like difference that I like struggled with as well, just because I didn't have parents who even went to high school. So that was a cultural shock in itself. But yeah, I mean, going down to Atlanta was definitely a culture shock. It was the first time where I just had seen so many Black people. And I was like, oh my God, there's like Black doctors and Black dentists and Black lawyers and Black teachers. And, you know, Spelman specifically was the first time that I felt like I was taught by Black educators, you know? And so just being educated by Black educators who like, you know, cared about you as a person. So not just as like a scholar, but like as an individual, and, you know, going to all girls school, they cared about you like as a woman and how you navigated life afterwards as well. So it was a culture shock for me, but in the best way. It was actually almost too much of a culture shock that I thought about like coming back to Boston. I was like, oh, this is like too much. Like I just felt overstimulated, but I loved it. I saw it through and I would not change my experience for anything. Spelman's magical. Like I just love Spelman so much. I ran for Miss Spelman when I was there too. So like I had just done everything that I could do at Spelman. I left very, very fulfilled and I'm still very connected. I still give back. Still go back to homecoming because it's the best homecoming. So still very connected to that school. And then UGA,
But hold on with Spelman. Was there anything that you wanted to do that you didn't do in Spelman? Like something that you feel like you missed out on?
No, if I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's anything that I had missed out on that I wasn't able to do after. So AKA, for example, was something that I had considered when I was at Spelman. And like for time purposes, I was in a pageant and I just didn't have the funds to. I could not pursue that, but that isn't something that I wasn't able to pursue after school. You know, like I became an AKA when I, you know, finally moved back to Boston. It was almost like a full circle moment too, just because a lot of the women that I felt like impacted my decision to go to Spelman, women that mentored me were in the chapter that I ended up crossing at. So it just was kind of like full circle. But that was like the only thing that I felt like I couldn't do at Spelman, but it didn't make my experience less than. And it, like I said, it wasn't something that I couldn't pursue later afterwards.
And did you say you joined AKA after you graduated?
Yep, graduate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the graduate level. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Are you familiar with like so you do know that people can like join Greek life after?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I know it's a lot more rare, but because a lot of people cross like during, but
yeah, I think it's more common than you think that people join in the graduate level, just because, yeah. So especially at HBCUs where like, obviously most people do want to join Greek life, your opportunity is kind of limited, right? Like they can only have so many people on, I mean, like now they have so many people crossing at the undergraduate level, but like, you know, back in my day, it wasn't that long ago, but there were caps on lines, you know what I mean? So it's like only 50 women could join every 2 years, you know? So it was very selective. It continues to be very selective, but I think it's very common, especially now, for people to join at the graduate level when they have the resources, like the financial resources to join, because it's expensive to be in a fraternity and a sorority, you know? Right. So yeah, it's definitely much more common than you think it is.
So how many people you think like would be the max to join?
In undergrad or graduate?
Graduate.
I don't think there's a max. I don't know if if you follow like Greek news at all, but like recently there was, I think in Atlanta, it was Atlanta or was someplace in Texas, there was like a line of like 200 plus women that joined the AKU. Yeah, so it's like, it's not, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, like if other schools have caps. I know once upon a time Spelman did have a cap. I'm not sure if they still do, but yeah, I mean, it just depends. And at the graduate level, I don't think there's caps for them either. I came in a pretty, what I consider to be a small line. It's me and 17 other girls. We're a line of 18. We're really close. I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Okay. And then as far as UGA, how was that?
UGA was interesting. So we talk about culture shock from like Boston to Atlanta, right, but then Atlanta to Athens, Georgia is another culture shock. You know, like I'm not, you know, to people that are viewing this podcast, it's a huge culture shock. So like Athens is like what I consider like also deep South. So like Atlanta to me is like a bubble, right? Like a really nice metropolitan bubble, like very diverse. And then like any which way in Atlanta you go an hour out, like you're in the country, and you might be in territory where you're not necessarily welcome either. And that was my experience at UGA. So even though it was fun, like I found like my group, I was in like the graduate and professional scholars association or group, whatever you call it. So I have found other Black professional scholars there at the time, but I had like run into like a few racist encounters when I was at UGA and in Athens, Georgia. Like I got denied car services when I wanted to just go get like my oil changed. And I just remember like even at the institutional level itself, I would, just coming from Spelman, everything that I thought about, I would think about through like a racial and through a gender lens. You know, and I majored in international policy and my master's was international policy as well. So when we're like studying and we're learning about policy on the international level, I could not help but see everything from a racial lens and how it impacted minorities there or how it impacted like women, right? And I remember like in class, I would always make it about those two things because I'm a Black woman. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to speak from that perspective. I remember somebody in class being like, why do you make everything about race? I'm like, because everything is about race, because everything is about gender, because everything is about class. You can't talk about war and how women and children tend to like bear the brunt of what's happening in those countries, but not see how people with darker complexions, or just say Black people, are not impacted worse in those countries, right? Or how women more than men are impacted worse. Like women are getting raped in these countries, you know, like it just, to me, it was like mindless to talk about it in like within those contexts. But like to have your classmates just be like, why do you always make it about this and this, that? I'm like, because it is about this. And I turned to the professor and I was like, you're not gonna say anything to him? Like, you think that's okay that he doesn't think that it's about? And the professor said nothing. And I was like, all right, heard you. I was like, now I know how everybody is operating in this school. But anyways, that was my experience. But otherwise, you know, I still got to go to the football games. You know, UGA is a huge SEC school. So like you have to take advantage. Huge. So like you have to take advantage of just the football games. You know, I got season passes when I was there. So I try to make the most of my experience there. And then when I just felt uncomfortable, I would go to Atlanta because I have friends there. So I remember one time leaving Chipotle and I got called a nigger. And I was like, oh, I was like, I'm gonna go to Atlanta tonight because I felt uncomfortable, you know? So yeah, it was an interesting time in my life.
Nah, I get it. Yeah, hey, it's still Georgia.
It's still Georgia, you know, and not to say that we don't experience racism up north, but it's very overt there.
Right.
You know, and over here it's kind of like covert, you know, like the way people tell you that they don't like you, it's a little bit more subtle than it is down there. And I don't know which one I prefer. I don't know if I prefer somebody calling me a nigger and telling me they don't like me because I'm Black, or if I prefer the the stairs in a store where I might not see, where I might look like I can't afford the stuff, you know?
Right.
I don't know.
So what's it like being a first gen?
Hard.
Yeah, I know.
Hard.
No.
I'm sure you can relate, but being a first generation definitely, it's like, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like, it's so rewarding feeling like you are the trailblazer in your family. Like, a legacy wasn't written and now you're like writing one yourself. And so it has been very rewarding, like knowing like what I can eventually like bring my kids into as well and what I can share with them. But it's definitely been challenging, you know, just not being able to like look to your parents for help for anything, or like just not having them understand what you're going through. And I could never make sense of it when I was in high school, until one of my like advisors was like, the reason why you struggle here is just because like your parents can't help you, you know, and they don't understand what you're going through, and they don't understand why you have to dedicate so many hours doing X, Y, and Z. Where like I had classmates who like at the dinner table, because they actually had dinner together with their family, I didn't, you know, they would talk about like topics, like they would talk about current events, they would talk about their science project, they would talk about what's going on in English class, like poetry, all like just you name it, they were discussing it like every day, like it was normal, you know, and that stuff wasn't normalized in my household. So I felt very isolated a lot of the time. I felt very alone. And I mean, that feeling kind of like, that feeling followed me like through college too, you know, when my parents would be like, you know, why are you going MIA for days at a time and not talking to us? I'm like, because I'm like really busy. And like, I know you can't understand, but like, I have stuff to do. I have like a foundation to build, you know, and I think it's hard for parents to like, I think it's already hard for parents to be empty nesters and to lose their kids with age, but to like lose your kids to stuff that you don't understand, like their time commitments that they have to dedicate to their craft and what they love to do. That's like a different type of thing that they have to grapple with. And even though they're grappling with it, you still feel the burden of it because they're making you feel bad about it. Right. So it's just kind of like, it's just like, I don't know. It's like cyclical, you know? And here I am like worried, like when I'm going to law school, like how are they going to feel about me not talking to them, like, you know, for maybe like weeks on end, like I can't see them because I got to like study. I don't know. So it's definitely been difficult, but more rewarding than difficult for me, you know? And I think it's definitely just shaped like my worth ethic too.
Right.
You know, like, because failure isn't an option. It was never an option.
Yeah.
So it's like, is it going to be hard? Yeah, but you're going to persevere. So, because you have no choice.
At times, did it feel like it was too much pressure?
From myself, I never felt pressure from other people or other things to do stuff. But like, and I go back to like the failure never being an option, you know, comment. It's just, you apply so much pressure on yourself that sometimes like you think that you won't get an A in this, or like you just won't do well in this. Like it's, yeah, I did sometimes feel that, but never to the point where I felt like I had to drop it, like I couldn't do it anymore. Like I always knew I had to persevere through it, but at the time, I guess it was difficult. Yes, I like, you know, battled with like mental health issues, like while I was in school, feeling very isolated, you know, but I persevere, you know, like I always like keep God, you know, my toolbox, and I keep my therapist in my toolbox. I've always been really good about seeking both when I feel my most depleted and have no energy to like do what I have to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. So what's some of the best advice you've gotten like thus far?
The best advice I've gotten?
Yeah. It don't have to be school. It could just be life, just any kind of like general advice. Like, oh, that was good advice.
So this does apply to school, but it's been a reoccurring theme in my life now.
Okay.
It's the importance of networking. I think I've seen time and time again how it is about who you know, right?
Right.
But it's also about who knows you and who can vouch for you. Because you can sit at a table and say, oh yeah, so I know so-and-so. But if they can't if somebody goes and mentions that they know that you knew them, but they can't vouch for you or say that they knew you too, like, you know, your effort went in vain in mentioning that person. So for me, I've always been like, Spelman taught us like how to network. Like everything was like a networking event. Most HBCUs will teach you that too. You know, just like the hustle and grind of it all. But even when it came to like law school and just understanding like what my options like will be for like internships and like postgraduate, you know, opportunities. Cause I mean, this is like irrelevant, but like I'm not going to like a top 14 law school. I'm not going to like a top 20 law school. So I had to like sit back and think about, okay, what are the implications of not going to a highly ranked school? Like what are the implications of that for my job, you know, my career opportunities? And I just keep being told, like, you know, as long as like you network and like you stand out, you succeed in school, you do well, and you are who you are, those three things, you put your best foot forward and you apply yourself, like you'll be fine. So I think networking is like probably like the best advice I've been given and the best advice that I can continue to give. It's not about who you know, but who knows you.
Right. That's cool. So yeah. I guess with that being said, like what advice would you give your younger self, saying like we go back maybe 10 years ago?
So 10 years ago, I was 20. I turned 30 in a few months. I would tell myself like not to sweat the small stuff, because I used to be so dramatic over like making like what now is like minor mistakes and stuff that like your life will go on. Like, even though it seems like so grave right now, like you're gonna be fine moving forward. And so I think if I just learn to not sweat the small things, my energy wouldn't be as depleted, because even to this day, like there's stuff that my boyfriend would just tell me, like, you don't need to give it your time and energy. Like, it's okay. It happened. Like, we'll move past it. But I'm the type of person that like, I harp on things, and I'm such a perfectionist. Like, things need to be done my way, which I think is the best way sometimes. And like, it has an effect on me where I start to feel less than because it didn't happen the way that I planned for it to happen, or the way that I planned for it to happen. So I wish I would have told myself, and I have to continue telling myself this even at my big old age, like, stop sweating the small stuff, like control what you can control and relinquish, I guess, your inability to control stuff, or like your anxiety about not being able to control stuff, just relinquish it. So I think that's like one thing that I would like advise my younger self and advise my current self.
And your current self too, huh?
Yeah, in my current self, because I still struggle with it now. You know, like even getting rejected from like law schools and stuff, like that was out of my control. Like I did the best I can do in applying, right? I did the best I can do on the LSAT. I applied 2 cycles, right? And at some point, you just have to like relinquish like the anxiety that comes with feeling less than over a decision that you could not control. Like I couldn't control who was reading my applications on that given day and what their mood was like reading my application, right? Or what they were looking for in the class and maybe what I didn't have, you know? So just learning to not take things personally and feeling less than when things didn't work out the way I wanted them to.
So speaking of like law school and LSAT, how long did you study for the LSAT?
A long time, on and off. So when I have finally decided to pursue law school, it was, when did the pandemic start? 2020, right? Okay. So that's when I had started thinking about law school, and I started studying that summer, but like I was very lackadaisical about it. It wasn't that serious until like the fall. And I applied, didn't get the score that I wanted. And then 2021 is when, that summer, when I like paid for a program and started like studying more intensely. So I want to say like almost a year and a half of studying.
Really?
Yeah. So like intensely, I want to say maybe like 6 months, like so June 2021, when I started studying and taking classes and like do like the practice exams all the way until like October and November when I took the LSAT. That's like what, 6 months about. Like, so in my most serious like stage, I want to say like 6 months. And that had to be like 6 months of constant repetition because unlike the DAT, the LSAT is it's all practical. It's all skills based.
Right.
So you have to practice like how to do the puzzles. Like you have to practice like logical reasoning and stuff of that nature. Like I can't just memorize science and go into it, you know? So the longer people study for it, like the better they'll do, you know? But also I just think that some people are just like going to be better at the LSAT than others, especially like if they grew up with their parents like strengthening certain skills like reading, like, and you know, analysis skills, you know. So it definitely, to me, maybe I'm biased, I do think it's a rigged exam. I do think it's an exam that favors people who have the resources to like to study for it and to do well for it, you know. So,
and I don't think I asked you this, but like what made you be like, all right, law school it is?
So this time last year, and for the past like 3 years, I had been doing investigations for the state and investigating into like discrimination cases, sexual harassment, sexual assault, like within like the workplace context. So very labor and employment heavy law work. So like figuring out like, you know, like legal violations, policy violations, and like having to write really, really long reports about these investigations. And I just realized like, my legal counsel, all they were doing was reviewing my reports. I was doing like the legwork, which was like the investigations, and then I was doing the analysis and I was doing the writing portion, you know? And so I was like, well, I want to get paid how they're getting paid to do the work that I'm doing for them.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like to me, it was like a no-brainer at that point because I just felt like, okay, where I'm like thinking about like upward mobility. I'm always thinking about like how can I like get better? How can I upgrade? How, you know? And at that time, it just felt like, well, there was no upward mobility, and the only upward mobility would be to be like legal counsel, you know? So that's when I started considering labor and employment law, just because I felt like it just didn't make sense to me that they were getting paid like double what I was getting paid, but not doing as much of the work or like the heavy lifting of the work. So I was like, no, I got to go back to law school. Not go back, but I got to go to law school.
And so what state are you going to law school in?
I'll be here in Massachusetts. I'm going to UMass Law.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. I've never heard like good things about law school. So
how did you feel when you got that acceptance? What, email, right?
Yes. Yeah. It was exciting.
You remember where you were?
I was here at my desk, and it was like it was like during my work day too. And so I remember, yeah, I think I remember just like emailing them a question about my application, and they were like, well, hey, I mean, like, since we already pulled your application up, like, we just wanted to let you know that you like got admitted. And I was like, okay, well, when were y'all gonna tell me this? Like, I mean, now that because I reached out to you guys, I had to wait a very long time for them to accept me. I applied to them like, I want to say like in January or like December, and I didn't hear back until like end of April that I got in. It was a really, really, really long time, to the point where I was like, are y'all gonna take me, or like what's going on here? But my first acceptance was at Southern University, and that was back in February, and it was February 22nd of 2022. It was like 2/2/2/22.
Right.
It was the perfect date, and I was like, oh, this is like the best way to like begin my season of receiving acceptances, rejections, waitlist, and all that stuff. It was like the best way to start it. It was the first decision that came out, and it was a positive decision. So it made me feel very hopeful about the rest of the cycle moving forward. And it was a tough cycle. I only ended up getting into 2 schools and waitlisted, I think, at like 7 or 8.
Okay.
So yeah, it was tough. It's a very, very tough process. And I'm still
by waitlisted, you mean like waitlisted to interview or waitlisted to?
So we don't have interviews for the law school process. I know with dental school you guys do. They don't interview for law school. It's very, very, very rare. Usually only smaller schools do it. But no, waitlist just means that like they reviewed your application and there's just no place in the class for you. So if somebody ends up relinquishing their seat, then they go back to their waitlist and like release more admission offers. So that's what it means. I think I just applied too late in the cycle. I applied early decision to a place where I got waitlisted at back in December. And then I had to like revamp my application just in case. So I ended up submitting later than I expected. So it just threw off my entire like cycle, getting that initial decision. But yeah, forward to it. Here I am 2 cycles later. So if y'all interested in law school, don't give up. Don't give up. It's hard. And don't take rejections as like personal attacks on your ability to succeed in law school. That's what I've also had to remind myself. You know, there's a plethora of reasons why they don't take students, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I could have sworn I was going to get into Howard. I was like, so not only did I not get into Howard, I got rejected. I was like, I wasn't even good enough to get waitlisted. I was like, y'all didn't review my application. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way. I have 2 degrees. I have so much work experience. I have, you know, just anyways, extensive like resume with a lot of stuff that I do, like extracurriculars. I'm really involved. So I was like, they didn't read my application. So I had to not take it seriously. I had to not take it seriously because I got rejected from lower ranked schools and got waitlisted at like some amazing schools like University of Alabama, University of Mississippi, University of Maryland. Like these are like top 30 schools, you know? So it just like the decisions like didn't make sense. So I was like, yeah, it doesn't have to do with who I am as a person. It might have just been timing at that point, you know? So.
Yeah, it's funny that you applied 2 cycles. I applied to dental school 2 cycles, like 2 different cycles. Yeah.
Yeah, I know people who applied 3 cycles to dental school too, 3 cycles to law school. It's just, if it's your passion, like you're not going to stop. Like, why would you stop just because of a rejection? Like somebody telling you no right now, it doesn't mean they'll tell you no in the future, right? Yep. And it makes your story, doesn't it? Because now when you graduate, you're going to say, I never gave up.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know?
Hey, so if you weren't, say you're a lawyer already, right? If you weren't a lawyer, what would you be? Like, what would be the alternative, I guess, career?
The alternative career would have been, so I'm not sure, the timing looks like it's going to run out, so I'm not sure if this will stop, but I would have been a diplomat. So I initially went to school to study international policy, and all my internships every single summer were with the Department of State, whether it was, you know, domestically at Foggy Bottom in DC, or one summer I lived in Thailand for 3 months where I interned at the embassy in Thailand. And I loved the work that like diplomats do. Like to me, like diplomacy is so interesting. But I had to like weigh how important it was for me to be domestic here and to be close to family and to be close to friends and to possibly find a partner. I have a lot of friends who are, I have a lot.
You send a link. Hold on, let me send a link and then we'll continue on.
Okay.
All right.